In this video, I'm going to show a little bit more detail in how the environment is set up. So let's start with this Ubuntu VM here, and I will go and show some playbooks, some Ansible playbooks that I have written to help set up what I call this is the control node, and how to build the Docker environment as well. So let me go and into the directory here. And you can see what I have here is I have 3 directories. I have a control node set up, a Jenkins Docker agent directory, and a Jenkins Docker environment setup directory as well. And so the control node setup is the Ansible playbook that actually sets the Linux Ubuntu VM up with all of the specific requirements such as Docker, Ansible, things of that nature. And the Jenkins Docker environment setup is what actually pulls down Docker images, and it also uses a local Docker image that I create with this Docker Compose file here. And what this directory does, or what this playbook does rather, is it actually spins up the Docker images. So in this particular case, it is going to be, let me pull the diagram back up. It is going to be this Jenkins container here and this Jenkins agent. And I'm not sure if I said in the beginning video, but the Jenkins agent is not anything you really need to do in a lab. You can run the agent you can run all the jobs from the Jenkins itself, the master. But just from a learning experience, I went ahead and set up my own Jenkins agent with my own custom Docker Compose file that is in this directory right here. So let's go over a few of these things here. So if you have a blank Linux VM set up, you should be able to go into the control node setup, and you should be able to look at the playbook. Let's look at the inventory real quick. And this is pretty basic. So I have my control node set up as my local host here, my local node. I have my DNS server here is actually set up to point back to this IP address of this host here. And then I have some variables here. In production, you would not want to put, your password here. You'd want to use some kind of secure vault or something like that, which I probably will wind up getting into eventually. So, but for now, I'm just hard coding the passwords here in the lab here. And the password for almost everything is, or the username is lab user, password is password123, just to kind of keep it simple. Okay. So, and if I look at, get out of here. If I look at the playbook, let's kind of just step through this. I derived a lot of this from the website here from DigitalOcean. You can see it here as a comment, but I added a few things to it as well. So the first thing you want to do is make sure you have, just going through the tasks here, you install Aptitude, then you install the required system packages. I added some packages in here that I like. The the SSH pass, which you need for password authentication for SSH, Open SSH server. Python is Python 3, and Ansible. Just a few things. You don't have to install the Python as Python 3. That's just something that I found. I thought it was pretty useful. Then you go and you go through the Docker. If you actually go and look at the Docker install process, it will actually look like this. So you add the GPG apt key, then you add the Docker repository, you update install Docker CE, then you update the CE CLI for Docker, container IO, Docker Compose plugin, install the Docker module for Python, and I upgrade pip. And you don't have to do this part, but I'm pulling some default Docker images and creating some default containers as well. That was all part. A lot of this was in that DigitalOcean website. So And all of these files that I showed earlier here, this is all going to be on my public GitHub site. So I will definitely link those in the description. Okay, so let's set up the control node. So all you have to do, I actually created a README file in here. It's pretty straightforward. And you can just issue this command here, which is an Ansible playbook command. You're looking at the local inventory file, and then the playbook, and then ask become pass, which is basically asking for the sudo password to install the all of the packages and things like that. So let's do that real quick. So I'm gonna do that. Password 123 for everything, like I said earlier. And then a lot of this may come up yellow or orange for you because I've already installed a lot of this already. Actually, I have, so everything should be green. But just to show you what it looks like going through the install. So this should set up the base environment for the Linux VM. All right, so the next thing we want to do is take a look at, let me get out of this directory, go up one. Okay, so now let's go into the Jenkins Docker environment setup. Actually, before I do that, let's go into Jenkins Docker agent, and let me show you that, how I created my own custom Docker, Jenkins agent. Okay, so if you look at the README, for example, it tells you to build the Docker image, just do a Docker compose build, no cache from this directory. And what it does, it looks at the Docker compose YAML and the Docker file, and what it does, it builds your custom Docker container. So there is a Jenkins agent container that exists on Docker Hub. I can't remember the details. I had some issues with it. I probably just didn't play around with it a lot, but I kind of wanted to learn how to build my own custom Docker container. So that's why I did this. So let me go and look at the Docker file and show you what it's doing. So it's pulling from the base image of Ubuntu 22.04. It's this is setting it, everything is non-interactive, so you don't have to enter yes prompts and things like that. It creates for SSH, privilege separation directory for SSH services. It updates the packages, all the packages. It adds the Ansible repository here. It updates the upgrade packages. It updates and upgrades the packages. And then it goes and starts installing things. So the Jenkins agent requires Java JDK to be installed. I believe 11 is the one it requires. So that's what it's doing here. So it's apt installing that. And then I ran into a problem. So I had to, after I did this OpenJDK install, I had to go back and do an update and upgrade as well. Then on this custom Docker container, I install the OpenSSH server. Then Python is Python 3. Don't have to do that. It's just something I like. Python 3 pip, Ansible, and then Git. And then I generate some SSH keys for it. I change the root password to password 123. I allow the root login, running this command. And then I go through start SSH services, create new Jenkins user, and update the password. So I create Jenkins password 123. Then it says Jenkins user. I copy the requirements.txt from the directory that I'm currently in into the directory on the custom Docker container. and I do a pip install on all that on the requirements.txt, and then at the end I change the user back to root. So in the pip requirements requirements.txt, you can see that these are the packages or the Python libraries that are required for this on this host, because we're going to be using this host to run Nornir jobs and things of that nature, Napalm, and all that sort of good things. Okay. And I'm not going to do it right now because it takes a bit. If you want to create that, you just do a Docker compose build, no cache, and then it creates you a local, where is it? Docker images. And then right here is the image that was created, and it's in my local Docker image environment. Okay, so now that we have that, I think I accidentally, let me see. Yeah, I have a couple of Docker images already running here that I created before I've started recording this video, but let's just go through that process. Pretty straightforward. So if I go and look at, if I want to start the environment, let me bring that back up. If I want to start these two Jenkins containers, Jenkins and Jenkins Agent 1, all I have to do is go into the Jenkins Docker environment setup. And the same thing here. It's actually the same inventory file, which is probably not best practice. You probably should have one inventory file for this, but it's just to show you. Actually, no, it is a little bit different. So I have an extra secret here, and this is not anything you want to do in production. Again, I know in production, you'd want to have some kind of secret vault to hold these things. But this is the key that is used to, let me go through the playbook and show you real quick. Okay. The first thing this playbook does, it sets the environment variable for, actually I didn't need that. That was for GitLab. I was going to work on GitLab at first, do a local GitLab Docker image, but I think I'm just going to use the public GitHub. So let me skip that one. Okay, this one, create Docker network. I'm calling that Docker network net automation, and that is really this file here. Or not file, sorry, this network, this net automation network here. And then I'm just going through and I'm making sure that I have a local Jenkins directory on my host node in the path share Jenkins here. And then I have a path for the Jenkins agent. That way it's persistent. So when I shut down the Docker container, the information is on the local host. So when I spin it back up, the data is still there. So it makes the data persistent. Okay, and so here I'm creating the Jenkins container, which is the main Jenkins container. The host name is jenkins.mylab.com. I have that set up in my DNS as well, pointing to the appropriate address. The network is, and the image is Jenkins latest. So that pulls it from Docker Hub, the latest Jenkins image container. And I'm saying the network is the net automation that I created previously. The alias, I'm calling it GitLab CE, the published ports. Basically a 1-for-1, 8080 and 50,000. The volumes, I'm not sure if 50,000, that might be, that was in the documentation. That might be for the control nodes. I can't recall off the top of my head. 8080 is what I use to access the web front end. And then the volumes, says that the host shared Jenkins that I created up above. If I scroll up on the local host, that takes the var Jenkins home inside the container and maps it to the local host's directory here to keep it persistent. And I have some comments here, or I've commented out a lot of things here that I don't really need right now. So I have the next one. Okay, so now I create the Jenkins agent container. Oh, yeah. I remember. So this, I was pulling the Jenkins inbound. So there's a Docker image called the inbound agent from Jenkins. And I was messing around with that. I had some issues. I don't remember what it was, but what I did instead, I created what I said earlier with that Docker file. I created my own custom image container for the Docker agent. Now, I probably could have used something other than Ubuntu, something a little bit more lightweight, but this is just a lab, so that's what I chose to use. So now I'm creating the Docker agent here. Basically the same thing. You just go through it. Yep. Okay. So all you have to do to spin this environment up, and you won't see anything change probably here because I already have them running. But if you want to do it, and I have a README file in here on the command to do, but it's Ansible playbook. Use -i for the inventory. You can just specify the local inventory file, then playbook name playbook.yaml, and then become pass, which is password 123, which is the sudo. So now it's just going to go through here and okay, so everything's green. Everything's already created. So if you do a Docker PS after this, you can see I have 2 images running here. Let me see if I can make this a little bit. I made the font kind of large so easier to see on the video. But there is a caveat with that because I can't get everything on 2 lines. Anyway, okay, so I have one container and 2 containers here. The first one is the Jenkins agent. The other one is the Jenkins control node or master node. So now that they're spun up, let me open up my Firefox browser. And okay, so I had already logged into this. Let me log out and show you. So you should get a login screen here. I already have my username and password cached. So this is accessing, and it's on the 8080 port that I talked about earlier that I have exposed. Okay, so Jenkins is working, and so Jenkins is up. So I want to make sure the control node is working. So I go over to manage nodes and clouds. So Jenkins agent, it's up. Oops. Yeah, it's up. It's in sync and it's up. So now these 2 images, let me pull that diagram back up. These 2 containers, the Jenkins and Jenkins agent, are up and running. The Jenkins is the master. Jenkins agent is sort of the is the slave node, if you will. So Jenkins is talking to the Jenkins agent over the net automation network that I built in Docker. So we're good there. So now they're up and running. So now let's go down and look at, I'm scrolling down here. Look at I have another host node that I mentioned in the first video going over the environment that is running Linux Mint 21 natively on bare metal. It's an old, not an old, it's my last PC I had, and I installed Linux Mint 21 on it, and I have EVE-NG running as a VM, and I have that up and running right now. So if I go and look at, I should have a bookmark for it. Eve login. Okay. All right. So here is the network diagram that I went over previously. So the local net here that I'm showing here is equivalent to this physical LAN here. And you'll see I have this connection to this MCI switch 01 going to gig 1/3. And what that represents is this MCI switch 01 1/3. So the VM from the control node that I set up here that we just spun up the Jenkins agents on, they will be able to access, because they're part of this same 192.168.1.0/24 network, and they'll be able to directly access MCI switch 001 or MCI switch 01, as will, of course, the VM itself. So let's see if we can get network access to some of these devices. So let me ping. I'm going to ping, this is .11, and that's going to be inside this local network, 192.168.1.11, and I can ping it, no problem. Let me see if I can ping the .10 address, which is also on this network. This switch here is it's all in the same VLAN. Gig 00 and gig 13 are on the same VLAN. So .10, see if I can ping that. Yep, I can ping that. Now let's see if I can ping something out here. Let me try to ping this loop back on this Phoenix router, 172.16.1.3. And you'll notice I cannot. That's because the host node does not know how to get to 172.16.1.3. So what I have to do, and I have this in a scratch pad up here, I have to add static routes. So I need to add static. Let me make this bigger. I need to add static routes for the networks at, let me go back. Where was I? I need to add the network for 192.168.150, which is in Flagstaff, the 192.168.185, and also for the loopbacks. So all the loopbacks are within a /30 range, .1, .2, and .3. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add routes to this host node pointed to this .10 address, which is this MCI router 01, which we've already said when I ping .10, since I'm directly connected to it, it was able to ping it, no problem. Okay, so I'm going to add these routes to the host node. I'm just going to copy this. Password 123. Okay, now those were added. So now let me try to ping that loopback again in Phoenix. And I can ping it. So we have network reachability to the Phoenix router. Let me just try some of the other ones. Let me try this Flagstaff switch, 192.168.150. What was it, .10? Yeah, .10. Yep, I can ping that. And let's try the Phoenix .10, 192.168. What was it? 185. 185.10. Yep, I can ping that too. Okay, so I have reachability to everything right now. Just as a note, the MPLS provider, I created this, and the 12 dots in the 169.254s and things like that are not reachable by design. So that is the environment. I think the next video, I'm going to go over some scripts that I created to access these devices through Nornir, and just kind of go through a few things about doing some changes on devices. I believe the way I have it set up, if memory serves, is I'll have to go back and look, but Flagstaff and Phoenix are brownfield devices, so this would be an existing site, that already has configuration. And so from an operational perspective and a stability perspective, we're only changing certain things like SNMP, NTP, syslog, things that won't really impact the forwarding plane. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back and call this Kansas City site, call that a greenfield site, for example, and try to automate the entire configurations of these devices. So in the next video, we'll be going over some Python and things of that nature. And also, if you want to, I didn't go through how to install Eve in G, but I think if you go, let me just go to Google. I'm running the free version, of course, of Eve in G, eveng.net. You go there, they have tons of documentations and FAQs and just a whole bunch of things that they have. This is a really good site. The how-tos are really good under the documentation. If you go to the how-tos, it tells you how to install, these images, Cisco, Checkpoint, Arista, things of that nature. So the images I have running in EVE-NG, I had previously bought Cisco Viral, or actually it's called what is it called now? Cisco CML Personal. And so I have those images. I do know that Arista has some free images for lab use, which are really, really good. So but if you have access to any of these images listed here, then you can run these within EVE-NG. So, okay. Thank you very much.